They thought the human was broken, because every system said he should be gone, unconscious, shut down. But Private Noah Kane just blinked through the pain, and smiled. His body was screaming to stop. His neural signals were already triggering shutdown. Every known species would have collapsed instantly. But he didn't. He looked at the alien, and said calmly, "Is that all you've got?" The entire chamber froze, because something impossible was happening. The human wasn't resisting pain. He was ignoring the system that was designed to end him. And that's when the Orlathi realized something terrifying. Humans don't fail to shut down. They simply refuse to. The alien collapsed. There was no dramatic build-up. No slow-motion fall. No warning in the air that something had gone wrong. 1 second the Orlathi warrior stood tall, balanced, composed. Every movement precise and controlled. The next he simply dropped. His body went limp as if someone had cut the strings holding him upright. The chamber remained silent for a heartbeat. Then, too. Because the fight was supposed to be over. It always was. The Orlathi didn't fight to destroy. They fought to demonstrate, to test, to understand. Their bodies were designed to shut down before real damage could occur. Pain was not something to endure. It was a signal, a boundary, a final line. The body refused to cross. The human didn't seem to know that. Corporal Daniel Hayes stood exactly where he had been struck. His head was still slightly turned from the impact, dark hair falling across his eyes. Slowly, almost lazily, he brought a hand up to his mouth and wiped at the blood forming on his lip. He stared at it for a moment, as if mildly curious. Then, he smiled. It wasn't a wide grin. It wasn't aggressive. It was something far worse. It was casual. "Okay," he said, voice steady, almost amused. That actually hurt. Across the chamber, Orlathi observers shifted uneasily. Their large, luminous eyes flickered between the fallen warrior and the human who refused to follow him into unconsciousness. Something was wrong. Something had broken the rules of reality as they understood it. The translators struggled to keep up with the rising murmur of their language. Words repeated over and over. Malfunction. Error. Impossible. From the observation deck above, Captain Aaron Voss felt a cold weight settle in his chest. "This," Dr. Lyra Sen whispered beside him, her voice barely audible. "This is not going to go well." Aaron didn't answer. He couldn't take his eyes off Hayes, because he knew exactly what was about to happen. The Orlathi warrior stood weakly on the ground, his body already beginning its recovery cycle. For them, the fight was done. The system had worked perfectly. Pain threshold exceeded, neural sedation activated. End of engagement. But Hayes hadn't received that message. The Orlathi referee stepped forward cautiously, raising a delicate hand. The match is concluded. Hayes moved. It wasn't fast. It wasn't violent. But it was deliberate. He rolled his shoulders, wincing slightly, and stepped forward again. "My turn," he said. That was when the fear truly began. The second strike came faster, harder. The Orlathi warrior, still disoriented, reacted on instinct. His fist connected with Hayes' ribs with a sickening crack that echoed through the chamber. Several observers gasped. Internal damage. Severe. More than enough to trigger sedation in any known species. Hayes staggered. His breath hitched. For a moment, it looked like gravity might finally claim him. Then he straightened out slowly, painfully, but undeniably still standing, still conscious, still smiling. Up in the observation deck, Lyra's fingers tightened around the railing. "His ribs are broken," she whispered. "They have to be." Aaron nodded once, his expression unreadable. "Yeah, then why is he still moving?" Aaron exhaled slowly, the answer sitting heavy on his tongue. "Because he can." Down below, the Orlathi warrior took a step back, not out of strategy, not out of caution, out of instinctive fear. "This is incorrect," the translator stammered. "You should be unconscious." Hayes tilted his head slightly, as if genuinely considering the statement. "Yeah," he said after a moment. "That would be convenient." The chamber erupted into controlled chaos. Orlathi officials rushed forward, their movements quick but hesitant, unsure whether to intervene or retreat. Medical scanners activated, projecting streams of data into the air. The results made everything worse. "Structural damage confirmed," one of the medics said, his voice shaking despite the translator's attempt to stabilize it. "Pain thresholds exceeded by significant margins. Neural shutdown should have occurred immediately." Lyra spoke quietly, more to herself than anyone else. "Humans don't have neural shutdown protocols like that." Velian, the Orlathi ambassador, turned to her slowly. Then what prevents them from destroying themselves? Lyra hesitated. She glanced at Erin. He answered instead. Nothing. He said the wood landed harder than any blow in the arena. Down below. Hayes finally exhaled sharply, his body beginning to show the strain it had been ignoring. The adrenaline that had carried him forward was fading, leaving behind the raw truth of his injuries. Okay, he muttered, pressing a hand to his side. Now that's starting to suck. He laughed weakly. The Orlathi didn't understand that sound. To them, pain was a stop signal, a command, something absolute. But this human treated it like background noise. The duel was terminated immediately. Medical teams rushed Hayes out of the chamber, surrounding him with scanners and stabilizers. Even then, he waved them off half the time, insisting he could walk on his own. The Orlathi watched him go, as if witnessing something unnatural, something wrong, something dangerous. The council chamber was quieter than space. VA Lion stood at the center, his usual calm demeanor, fractured by something new, something uncertain. "You must explain," he said, looking directly at Erin and Lyra. "What we witnessed contradicts everything we understand about sentient life." Lyra stepped forward, her voice measured but gentle. Humans evolved on a very unforgiving world. Pain wasn't always a signal to stop. Sometimes, stopping meant death. The eyes flickered. "So your bodies ignore pain?" "No," Erin said. "We feel it, trust me." "Then why continue?" That question lingered. It echoed. It mattered. Erin met Velian's gaze. "Because we decide to." Silence followed. Not confusion, not disbelief. Something deeper. Fear. The alarms came before anyone could say anything else. Harsh, sudden, violent. The kind of sound that didn't ask for permission. Unknown vessels approaching. A voice called out. "Weapons signatures active." Velian turned sharply. "This is not scheduled. There are protocols." The first explosion cut him off. The station trembled. Lights flickered. Somewhere in the distance something ruptured violently. Pirates. Real ones. Not ritual combatants. Not controlled engagements. Predators. The Orlathi. Froze. Their systems searched for rules. The pirates didn't follow any. Erin didn't hesitate. "All Terran personnel," he said, already moving. "Gear up." Lyra grabbed his arm. "There. Not ready for this." Erin glanced back once. "No," he said. "But we are." What followed would change the galaxy forever. The Orlathi watched as humans moved into chaos like it was familiar territory, like it was home. They didn't wait for perfect conditions. They didn't wait for fairness. They fought. A Marine took a hit that should have dropped him instantly. He kept firing. Another dragged a wounded ally across open ground while returning fire with one hand. Hayes' bandage, barely stabilized, joined the defense anyway. "Couldn't miss the fun," he said. Breath uneven. The Orlathi didn't understand. They watched injuries accumulate. Watched bodies pushed beyond limits. Watched humans refuse to stop. One Terran ship took a direct hit. Its engines failed. Hull integrity collapsed. By every known standard. It was dead, but it didn't retreat. It accelerated. Velian's voice trembled. "What are they doing?" Erin's answer was quiet. "Choosing." The ship slammed into the pirate vessel. Lights swallowed both. Silence followed. When it was over, the attackers were gone. So were many humans. Velian stood in the aftermath, staring at the void where the ship had been. "You are dangerous," he said softly. Erin didn't argue. He didn't defend. He just looked at the empty space and nodded once. "Yeah," he said. Then, after a pause, "But not for the reason you think." Velian hesitated. "Then why?" Erin turned, his expression calm, but heavy with something the Orlathi were only beginning to understand. "Because we don't have to stop," he said. "We choose when we do." And in that moment, the galaxy realized something terrifying. Humans weren't bound by limits. They were defined by the absence of them. "Why are you still moving?" The scream echoed through the burning corridor. Sharp, panicked, completely unrestrained. Sergeant Kael Mercer didn't answer. He couldn't. His right arm hung at an unnatural angle. Armor cracked open, bone barely visible beneath torn flesh. Blood dripped steadily from his fingertips, splattering across the metallic floor in dark, uneven patterns. Every step he took left a smear behind him, a trail marking exactly how far past his limits he had already gone. And yet, he kept walking. Not fast, not steady, but forward, always forward. The emergency lights flickered violently overhead. casting the corridor in pulses of red and shadow. Smoke filled the air, thick and suffocating, carrying the metallic scent of burning circuits and something far worse. The ship, once pristine and silent, now felt alive in all the wrong ways, groaning, cracking, dying piece by piece. Behind him, Terex staggered, clutching the wall for support. The alien medic's breathing came in sharp, uneven bursts. His neural implant had failed minutes ago, and without it, the raw intensity of pain had overwhelmed his body almost instantly. Even minor injuries now felt catastrophic. His species had evolved to avoid suffering entirely. They were never meant to endure it. Kael. Stop, Terex gasped, voice trembling as the translator struggled to keep up with his rising distress. You are critically damaged. Your body should be shutting down. Kael let out a weak, breathless chuckle. Yeah, he muttered, shifting his weight as another wave of pain shot through his ribs. That's not really our thing. He stumbled, catching himself against the wall with his good hand. For a brief moment, the world tilted. Darkness crept in at the edges of his vision, threatening to pull him under. It would be so easy. Just let go. Just stop. The thought slipped in quietly, almost gently. But Kael pushed it away. Not now. Not while they were still alive. The harmonic dawn had been built as a symbol of unity, a vessel where dozens of species lived and worked together in perfect balance. Conflict had been reduced to theory, to simulation, to something studied rather than experienced. Every being aboard relied on the same fundamental principle. Pain was a signal to stop, and their bodies ensured they listened. Neural sedation implants handled the rest. No suffering, no unnecessary damage, no death, until the systems failed. The first attack had been swift, brutal, efficient, no warnings, no negotiation. Just weapons fire tearing through the hull like it was paper. Kael had been in the central corridor when the alarms triggered. He remembered the moment clearly, the sudden shift from calm routine to chaos. Lights flashing, systems shutting down, voices overlapping in confusion. Then the implants went offline. At first no one understood what that meant. Then the screams started. Aliens collapsed where they stood, clutching at injuries that would normally have been suppressed instantly. Minor wounds became unbearable. Moderate injuries became crippling. Entire sections of the crew were rendered immobile. Within minutes, the ship hadn't just been attacked, it had been paralyzed. Everyone except Kael. He pushed forward now, boots scraping against the floor, as distant explosions rattled the structure. Around him, every sound felt amplified, distorted by the constant ringing in his ears. Evacuation bay, he muttered under his breath, more to keep himself focused than anything else. Just a little further. Terex followed, though every step clearly cost him. I do not understand, the medic said, his voice shaking uncontrollably. Your injuries exceed functional thresholds. Your nervous system should be forcing shutdown. That is, basic, biological preservation. Kael glanced back briefly, his expression strained but oddly calm. Yeah, he said. Humans didn't really evolve with that feature. That is not possible. Kael gave a faint, humorless smile. Tell that to my arm. They turned a corner and stepped into a wider corridor. Buddies lined the walls, some unconscious, some barely conscious, all of them unable to move. The attackers advanced from the far end, dark, armored figures moving with cold precision. They didn't hesitate. They didn't slow. They simply eliminated anything in their path. Terex froze, his body locked up completely, instincts overwhelmed by fear and pain. I cannot, he whispered. Kael didn't stop. He stepped in front of him instead, raising his weapon with one functioning arm. His aim wavered slightly, but his grip tightened. Then don't, he said quietly. Just stay behind me. The first shot hit him in the side. The impact drove the air from his lungs, forcing a sharp gasp from his throat. Pain exploded outward, bright and overwhelming. For a split second, everything stopped. The world narrowed, sound faded, and that same quiet voice returned. Enough. You've done enough. Kael closed his eyes, just for a second. Then he opened them again. Not yet, he whispered, and he fired back. The firefight was messy, uneven, desperate. Kael moved like a man held together by will alone. Every motion was slower than it should have been. Every reaction delayed by fractions of a second that could have cost him everything. But he didn't stop. He couldn't, because behind him, Terex and dozens of others were still alive. Because stopping wasn't an option. The attackers fell back, under the unexpected resistance, clearly unprepared for someone who refused to go down. They had designed this assault around predictable biology. Kael was not predictable by the time they reached the evacuation bay. Kael was barely standing. The massive doors loomed ahead, partially open, revealing the chaos beyond. Civilians rushed toward escape pods, guided by the few crew members still capable of movement. "Get him out," Kael said, leaning heavily against the wall. Terex stared at him, his wide eyes filled with something between awe and horror. "You are dying," he said quietly. Kael nodded once. "Yeah," he replied. "Probably. Then why continue?" Kael looked toward the evacuation bay at the people still running, still trying, still alive. He smiled faintly. "Because they aren't." The final attack came fast. Too fast. Kael positioned himself at the entrance, raising his weapon one last time. His vision blurred completely now. Shapes blending into shadows. His body was done. Completely done. But his mind wasn't. And that was enough. "Go," he told Terex without looking back. "I will not leave you." Kael huffed a quiet laugh. Then, "Watch closely." The corridor filled with light, sound, violence. Kael moved forward. Into it. Not because he could win, but because he could delay. And sometimes, that was all that mattered. When it was over, the evacuation bay was empty. The survivors were gone. The attackers had been stopped, and Kael Mercer finally stopped moving. Later, in the quiet aftermath, Terex stood alone in the medical bay. Screens filled with human data surrounded him. Biological readings, combat reports, psychological analyses. None of it made sense. By every measurable standard, Kael should have lost consciousness long before the final stand. His body had failed completely. And yet, he had continued. Terex tried to replicate it. He studied neuronal pathways, simulated stress responses, attempted to isolate the mechanism that allowed such behavior. Every experiment failed, every model broke, until one realization finally settled in. Cold, unavoidable, terrifying. It wasn't the body, it wasn't the brain, it wasn't anything physical at all. Terex slowly lowered his hands, staring at the data as the truth became impossible to ignore. "They do not lack an off switch," he whispered. "They ignore it." And for the first time since meeting humanity, he understood why that was far more dangerous. They surrendered. The words hung in the air like something fragile, like if anyone spoke too loudly, they might shatter. Commander Elena. Riker didn't move. She stood at the front of the command deck, eyes locked on the battlefield projection floating before her. Dozens of enemy ships drifted in formation, their weapons powered down, shields lowered, signals broadcasting one clear message across every channel: surrender accepted. By all known laws. The war was over. Behind her, one of the Alliance officers let out a slow breath of relief. "It's done," he said quietly. "They've yielded." Elena's jaw tightened. Something didn't feel right. War didn't just end like this. Not clean. Not easy. "Maintain defensive posture," she ordered, her voice calm but firm. A ripple of confusion moved through the bridge. "They've surrendered," another officer repeated, as if she hadn't heard it the first time. "I know," Elena said. Her eyes never left the projection, and was still watching. The Alliance had always believed in rules, clear boundaries, predictable outcomes. War, to them, was a structured exchange, violence contained within limits. Once those limits were reached, once pain or loss exceeded acceptable thresholds, surrender followed. And surrender was sacred. No deception, no retaliation, no exceptions. Elena had studied their doctrine before joining the joint operation. She had wanted to believe it. A galaxy where war ended before it consumed everything. Where people chose survival over destruction. It sounded almost human. Armos. "Commander," her tactical officer said suddenly, voice sharp with alarm. Energy spikes detected across enemy fleet. Elena's eyes narrowed. "Explain." Their powering the sentence never finished, because the battlefield lit up. Enemy weapons fired simultaneously, cutting through the silence like a blade. Alliance ships, still in passive formation, took the hits directly. Shields flickered too late. Hulls ruptured instantly. The first wave of explosions spread across the formation, like a chain reaction. Screams filled the sums. Confusion, panic, disbelief. They broke surrender. Someone shouted. "That's not possible." Elena moved. Before the chaos could take hold, all units evasive maneuvers. Weapons free. Now. Her voice cut through the panic like a weapon of its own, but it was too late for many. Civilian transports armed exposed were the first targets. They hadn't even tried to run. Why would they? The war had ended. According to the rules, the enemy didn't care about the rules. They never had. The aftermath was worse than the attack itself. The battlefield was littered with wreckage, broken ships, lost signals, silence, where voices had been moments before. Alina stood in the command center, staring at the casualty reports as they scrolled endlessly across the screen. Thousands. Gone not. Because they lost. Because they believed. Her second-in-command stepped closer, his voice low. They used surrender as a weapon. Alina nodded slowly. Yes, she said, and we handed it to them. Hours later, the enemy fleet regrouped, and once again, they transmitted the same signal. Surrender. Accepted. The bridge went silent. No one spoke. No one moved. Because this time, everyone understood what it meant. They're doing it again. The tactical officer whispered. Alina closed her eyes for a moment. Just one. Behind her eyelids. She saw the transports burning. The civilians, who never had a chance to react. The Alliance officers who had trusted in something that didn't exist anymore. Rules.order.mercy.she. Opened her eyes, Commander. Her second said carefully, if we ignore their surrender, we violate Alliance law. Alina didn't respond immediately because this wasn't just a tactical decision. It was a moral one. If she followed the rules, more people would die. If she broke them, she became something else. Something the Alliance feared. Something they had tried to evolve beyond. Her hand hovered over the command console. For a moment, she hesitated. Then she spoke. Target their fleet. The words felt heavier than anything she had ever said. They are surrendering, the Alliance officer insisted, panic creeping into his voice. Alina turned to face him. No, she said quietly. They're lying. The first volley from her fleet tore through the enemy formation before they could react. No hesitation, no warning, no second chances. The enemy ship scrambled, trying to raise shields, trying to regroup. But this time, it didn't matter. Alina didn't stop. Maintain fire, she ordered. Her voice didn't shake, but something inside her did, because every shot fired wasn't just destroying the enemy. It was destroying the idea that war could be clean. When it was over, there was nothing left. The enemy fleet was gone, reduced to drifting debris and fading energy signatures. The battlefield fell silent once more, but this silence was different, heavier, darker behind her. No one celebrated, no one spoke, because everyone understood what had just happened. They had won, but not the way they were supposed to. The Alliance Council convened within hours. Their verdict came quickly. Commander Alina Riker, the lead delegate, said, his tone cold and controlled. You have violated the fundamental laws of engagement. You fired upon a surrendering force. By all definitions, this constitutes a war crime. Alina stood alone in the chamber, hands clasped behind her back. She didn't argue. She didn't defend herself, because part of her agreed. Yes, she said simply. The council shifted, clearly not expecting that answer. You admit guilt? Alina met their gaze. I admit reality. Silence followed. They used your rules against you, she continued, her voice steady. And they will keep doing it, until there's no one left who believes in them. The chamber remained still, because, deep down, they knew she was right. Later, standing alone in the observation deck, Alina looked out at the stars. They were calm, unchanged, unaffected by what had happened. Victory, that's what they would call it. But it didn't feel like one. It felt like something had been lost. Something important. Something fragile. Her unit buzzed softly. A message from the Alliance command. Official condemnation. Unofficial. Acknowledgement. Lives saved. She exhaled slowly. War should have ended. She whispered to herself. Then her expression hardened. But it didn't. And next time, she wouldn't hesitate at all. That ship is destroyed. The statement was calm, clinical, certain. And yet, another voice replied, quieter. This time, it is still firing. Silence spread across the observation chamber, like a slow-moving shadow. The holographic display at the center of the room flickered, projecting the battlefield in stunning detail. Dozens of ships drifted across the void, exchanging fire in bursts of light and energy. Explosions bloomed like distant stars, brief and violent. At the center of it all, the human fleet, or what remained of it. Admiral Juno Hawley stood with her hands clasped behind her back, eyes fixed forward, expression unreadable. Around her, representatives from across the concordance watched in growing unease. They had requested this broadcast. They had wanted to understand human warfare. Now they weren't so sure. The battle had started hours ago. At first it had seemed straightforward. The enemy fleet outnumbered the humans 3-1. Superior in size, in firepower, in numbers. Biological projections. The outcome had been obvious. Humans would engage, take losses, reach critical thresholds, and surrender. That was how war worked. That was how it always worked. But the projections had failed almost immediately, because the humans did not stop. Report, Valerie said from the observation tier, her voice tight with restrained tension. One of the analysts stepped forward, his appendages trembling slightly as he processed incoming data. Human vessel designation Aegis Dawn has sustained catastrophic damage. Hull integrity below 20%. Life support failing. Command deck unresponsive. Valerie nodded slowly. Then it is no longer combat capable. The analyst hesitated. Then, why? He asked quietly. Is it still advancing? The room fell silent again, because on the display, the ship moved, not drifting, not falling apart, moving forward, deliberately. Its engines flickered, barely functional. Sections of its hull burned, venting atmosphere into the void. By every measurable standard, it was already dead. And yet, its weapons fired again and again and again. Admiral Kael didn't look away. She had seen this before. She had lived it. But watching it from this perspective, from outside the fight, from the safety of observation felt different, colder, more honest. They should be retreating, one of the delegates whispered. They should be unconscious. Another added. They should be dead. Someone else said. Hale's voice cut through the murmurs. They are dying, she said calmly. The room quieted. But they're not finished. On the battlefield, the human fleet continued its advance. Ships that had lost entire sections still maneuvered with precision. Crews that should have been incapacitated continued to operate weapons, reroute power, issue commands. It didn't make sense, not to the observers, because everything they knew about life, about limb said, this was impossible. Pain should have stopped them. Damage should have ended it. Death should have silenced them. But none of it did. A new alert flashed across the display. Enemy targeting solution locked on Aegis Dawn, the analyst reported. Multiple Hegel weapons inbound. Villa leaned forward slightly. That will be the end of it. Kael didn't respond. She just watched. The impact came seconds later. A blinding flash swallowed the ship, followed by a violent shockwave that rippled outward across the battlefield. For a moment, the display flickered under the intensity of the explosion. When the light faded, the ship was still there, broken, burning, barely holding together, but still there. And then, it fired. A single volley, direct, precise. The enemy cruiser, in its sights, erupted into fragments. Gasps filled the chamber. That is not possible. Valerie whispered. Kael exhaled slowly. Yeah, she said. We get that a lot. The battle dragged on. Time lost meaning. Each passing minute brought more destruction, more loss, more evidence that the humans refused to follow any known pattern of survival. Ships that should have disengaged pressed forward instead. Crews that should have evacuated stayed at their posts. Every logical endpoint ignored. Every natural limit overridden. Then came the moment that would define everything. Admiral, the analyst said, his voice barely steady. Aegis Dawn has lost all propulsion. Weapons systems critical. Reactor unstable. Valerie straightened. Then it is over. Hale's eyes narrowed slightly. No, she said quietly. Now it gets interesting. On the display, the crippled ship drifted for a moment. Then its engines flared. Not fully, not safely, just enough. A collision course? Valerie asked, confusion creeping into her voice. Kael nodded once. They're not trying to survive, she said. They're trying to finish the job. The enemy fleet reacted too late. By the time they adjusted their formation, by the time they recognized what was happening, the Aegis Dawn was already moving, faster than it had any right to. Its hull tore itself apart under the strain. Systems failed one by one. Internal explosions rippled through its structure. None of it mattered, because it didn't stop, it didn't slow, it didn't hesitate. The final moments stretched into something almost unreal. A broken ship, a dead crew, a single impossible decision. Then, impact. The explosion was unlike anything the observers had seen. It didn't just destroy the target, it tore through multiple vessels. A chain reaction of destruction that spread outward, like a ripple across water. When the light finally faded, there was nothing left of the Aegis Dawn, or the ships it had taken with it. The chamber fell into silence. No one spoke. No one moved. There were no words for what they had just witnessed. Valari's voice came first, barely, a whisper. They used their own destruction as a weapon. Hole nodded slowly. Yes, but why? Holly met her gaze. Something deeply human. Because stopping wasn't an option, she said quietly. They decided finishing the fight mattered more. Valari looked back at the empty void on the display. To die, on purpose, she whispered. Holly shook her head. No, she said. To win. The broadcast ended soon after. The human fleet had lost more than half its strength. The enemy had lost everything. By every definition, it was a victory. And yet no one in that chamber felt like celebrating, because they had witnessed something they could never unsee, something that changed everything. As the delegates slowly filed out, "Don't fear death," she said softly. Hale paused at the doorway, then replied without turning back. "We do," she said. "That's why we fight so hard when it matters." Valari frowned. "That does not make sense." A faint smile touched Hale's lips. Then she stepped out, leaving Valari alone with one undeniable truth. Humans didn't just fight until they died. Sometimes they kept fighting even after that. Shut him down. Dr. Elion Vex didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His tone was calm, precise of salute. The laboratory hummed quietly around him. Machines glowing, data streaming across translucent displays. But the human on the table didn't follow patterns. Override neural activity, Elion repeated. Initiate. Sedation cascade. The technicians hesitated. "It's already active," one said carefully. "Every pathway is firing correctly." That wasn't possible. He stepped closer to the observation glass. Private Noah Kael lay restrained, his body still, breathing slow and controlled. He should have been unconscious. According to reality, he wouldn't mow it. Opened one eye and looked straight at the glass. "Doc," he said dryly, "if this is your idea of a nap, I'm not impressed." Several technicians flinched. Lyo and didn't. He leaned forward slightly, fascinated. "Your pain thresholds have been exceeded," he said. "Your neural systems are actively suppressing consciousness, yet you remain aware. Explain." Noah shifted, wincing as pain surged through him. The monitors spiked instantly. He still managed to grin. "Yeah," he said. "We get that a lot." The experiment had begun as curiosity. Humans were new to the concordance, and their biology raised questions. Reports described soldiers fighting through catastrophic injuries. Civilians functioning under conditions that should have caused immediate collapse. Elion had dismissed it all, until he saw the data. Now, he dismissed nothing. Increased stimulus. He ordered the technicians. Hesitated. "We are already at maximum safe parameters." Elion didn't look away. "Define safe." No one answered. Because in this room, safe no longer meant anything. The machines adjusted. A low hum filled the chamber as neural stimulation intensified. Noah's brain activity surged, chaotic, overwhelming. This was the point where every known species shut down. No exceptions. Noah clenched his jaw. His fingers tightened against the restraints. A sharp breath escaped him. Then, slowly, he relaxed. "Okay." Elion's eyes widened. "Impossible. Your brain is forcing shutdown," he said. "The cascade is complete. There is no remaining pathway for awareness." Noah let out a weak chuckle. "Guess you missed one." Elion turned to the data again and again, searching for errors. There were none. Everything was functioning perfectly, which meant the system wasn't the problem, the human was. "Why do you resist?" Elion asked. "There is no advantage to staying conscious." Noah was quiet for a moment. Then he shrugged slightly. "Habit," he said. Elion stared. "That is not sufficient." Noah smiled faintly. "All right," he said. "Try this where I come from. Stopping isn't always an option." The next phase pushed further. Full neural suppression. Total shutdown. Every system activated. It should have worked. The monitors confirmed it. Signals peaked, then flattened. For one perfect moment, Noah Kael was gone. Elion exhaled. There. Now it functions correctly. Then Noah opened his eyes. The room froze. "Did it work?" he asked weakly. Elion said nothing. For the first time in his career, He had no answer. Hours later, the lab was silent. The experiment had ended, but the data remained. Every test confirmed the same thing. The shutdown signals triggered. The brain responded correctly. And still, the human continued. Elion sat slowly, staring at the results. It wasn't biological. It wasn't neurological. It wasn't measurable. Which left only one conclusion. They are not failing to shut down. He whispered, they are choosing not to. Days later, he tried again. Different subjects. Different conditions. Same result. The body reached its limit. The shutdown began. And then, something pushed back. Something unseen. Unmeasurable. Uncontrollable. Unpredictable. In his official report, Elion wrote only this: humans do not lack an off switch. He paused, then added, they override it for the first time. The scientist wasn't studying the human, he was afraid of it. Your soldier is malfunctioning. The voice echoed coldly across the medical bay. Lieutenant Mara Kael didn't look up. She was too busy holding him down. Hold him steady, she snapped. The soldier thrashed violently, blood soaking his band. Every breath was a struggle. He should have been unconscious. He should have stopped, but he hadn't. He's not malfunctioning, Mara said, finally turning. He's fighting. Commander Zethra tilted his head. No organism continues under this level of trauma, he said. That is a defect. Mara almost laughed. Yeah, she muttered. We get that a lot. The misunderstanding had started days earlier. First contact between humans and the Zenthari collective had been tense, not hostile, not aggressive, but cautious. The Zenthari were a species built on logic, efficiency, and biological harmony. Every system in their bodies functioned with precise purpose. Pain had a role, and when that role was fulfilled, the body shut down. Clean, controlled, safe humans didn't, and that was the problem. The incident that changed everything happened. On the battlefield, a routine escort mission, nothing complicated. A small convoy of Zenthari transport vessels, lightly defeated, moving through what was supposed to be secure territory. Then the attack came. Fast, unpredictable, unknown. Hostiles tore through the convoy defenses in seconds, their weapons ripping into shields and hulls with brutal efficiency. The Zenthari ships responded as they always did, organized, precise, following protocol. And when casualties reached critical levels, they stopped. Cliffs powered down. Weapons fell silent. Surrender. Signals broadcast across every channel. Because that's what they were designed to do. That's what every species in their alliance did. Except the humans. Mara remembered the moment. Clearly, she had been on the bridge, watching the battlefield collapse into silence. Zenthari vessels, drifting helplessly, enemy ships closing in, and her own crew, waiting for an order that hadn't come yet. Ma'am, her tactical officer said quietly, they've surrendered. Mara stared at the screen. At the incoming enemy fleet, at the defenseless ships behind her. Then she made a decision. Yeah, she said. They did. A pause. Then, colder, we didn't. The human ship surged forward. Weapons igniting, engines roaring to life. They charged straight into a battle that was already supposed to be over. The enemy hesitated, just for a second. That was all Mara needed. Back in the present, the medical bay was silent except for the strained breathing of the wounded soldier. Zethra observed carefully as the human's body continued to resist every natural limit placed on it. This behavior is illogical, the alien commander said. Continuing in such a state only increases the probability of death. Mara tightened her grip on the soldier's shoulder as he struggled. Yeah, she said quietly. We know. Then why continue? She glanced at Zethra, her expression hard. Because stopping doesn't always save you. The truth revealed itself slowly, not through words, through action. After the battle, Zenthari analysts reviewed the engagement data, frame by frame, second by second. What they saw didn't make sense. Human soldiers continuing to fight after injuries that should have incapacitated them. Crew members sealing breaches manually while exposed to vacuum. A Gunnerhoff, his body burned, still firing, until his system physically failed. This is not survivable behavior. One analyst whispered. Zeta Saray didn't respond, because he was starting to understand. The final realization came during a second attack, smaller this time, but just as deadly. Zen forces followed protocol again. Defensive positions, controlled engagement, monitoring damage thresholds. And when the moment came, they hesitated. Because this time, something was different. They had seen what happened before. They had seen the humans. Mara stood on the battlefield, blood running down her arm. Her vision slightly blurred. Everything hurt. Every instinct told her to stop, to rest, to give in. She ignored all of it. "Get up," she shouted, her voice raw but unbreakable. "You stop, you die. Move." And this time, one of the Zenthari didn't shut down. Zethra watched it happen. The alien soldier staggered, paused his body, trying to initiate sedation, trying to force him into safety. He resisted, just for a second, then another, and another, until finally, he took a step forward. After the battle, Zethra found Mara standing alone, staring out into space. "You were correct," he said. Mara didn't turn. "About what?" Zethra paused, carefully choosing words that felt unfamiliar. "You are not malfunctioning." Mara smirked slightly. "Told you," Zethra continued, his voice quieter now. "You are evolved differently." That made her laugh. "Dangerously," he added. Mara finally looked at him. There was no fear in her expression, just exhaustion, and something deeper. "Yeah," she said softly. "That sounds about right." Zethra studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, "We thought you were broken." Mara shrugged. "Maybe we are." A pause. Then she met his gaze directly. "But when things go bad," her voice hardened. "That's exactly what keeps us alive." And for the first time, Zethra wasn't analyzing humans anymore. He was learning from them. "Get up." The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. Instructor Dax Wren stood over the fallen trainee, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Around them, the training ground was silent, dozens of alien recruits watching, none of them moving, none of them breathing too loudly, because they all knew what came next. The Kirathi trainee on the ground, Kira, was shaking. Her body had already decided this was over. Pain signals flooded her system, overwhelming her senses, triggering the biological failsafe her species had relied on for thousands of years. Her muscles trembled uncontrollably, her vision blurred, her breathing shallow. She was supposed to stop. She was supposed to shut down. That's how survival worked. "Get up," Dax repeated, calmer this time. Kira tried. Her arm twitched, then failed. Her body refused to listen. "I can't," she whispered, her voice breaking under the strain. Dax crouched beside her. Not helping, not touching, just watching. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That's the problem." The Terran God training program had broken dozens of recruits. Already, not physically, mentally, species from across the Concordance had volunteered, driven by what they had witnessed during the war. They had seen humans fight beyond reason, beyond logic, beyond survival, and they wanted to understand it. They thought it was strength. They were wrong. "Your body isn't the issue," Dax said, his voice steady, almost patient. "It's doing exactly what it's designed to do. It's trying to protect you." Kira squeezed her eyes shut, a tear slipping down the side of her face. "Then why does it feel like I'm dying?" she gasped. Dax gave a faint, humorless smile. "Because it hurts." A few of the human instructors in the background chuckled softly. Not cruel, just familiar. Kira's breathing grew sharper, panic creeping in. "This is wrong," she said. "My system is initiating shutdown. I can feel it. I can't stop it." "Good," Dax cut in. She froze. "What?" "Good," he repeated. "Now you know where the line is." He leaned closer, his voice dropping just enough that only she could hear. "Now, step over it." She didn't understand. How could you step over something your body controlled? How could you fight something built into your biology? Her muscles screamed, her nerves burned. Every instinct demanded surrender. But somewhere beneath all of it, there was a choice. Small, fragile, almost invisible. Dax stood up slowly, stepping back. "Last chance," he said. "Stay down. You're done. No shame in it." The watching recruits shifted slightly. This was the moment everyone knew it. Most failed here. Kira opened her eyes. Her vision was blurred, unfocused, but she could still see him, standing there, waiting, not forcing her, not helping her, just giving her the option. That was the difference. Not command, not instinct. Choice. Her fingers curled against the dirt. Pain exploded through her arm instantly. She gasped, but didn't stop. Her elbow locked. Her muscles trembled violently. Her body tried again to shut everything down. She pushed back, not with strength, not with training, with sheer refusal. "I said," she forced the words out through clenched teeth. "I can't." Dax tilted his head slightly. Yeah, he said. You did. A pause. Then try anyway. Something snapped, not in her body, in her mind. The invisible line her species had never crossed. Broke. Kira screamed, not in fear, not in pain, but in defiance, as she forced her body. Upright, slow, shaking, unstable. But standing. The training ground went completely silent. No one moved. No one spoke, because they all understood what had just happened. Kira swayed on her feet, barely conscious, every part of her screaming to collapse again. But she didn't acknowledge. Dax watched her for a long moment. Then, finally, a small nod. Good, he said. Not impressed, not surprised, just certain. Kira collapsed seconds later, her body finally winning the fight. Medical teams rushed in instantly, stabilizing her, carrying her away. But it didn't matter. The moment had already happened. That day, something changed. Not just in one. Recruit out in everyone watching because they had seen the truth. Pain wasn't a command, it wasn't an ending. It was just information. And for the first time in their history, they understood what humans already knew. Stopping was a choice. The silence before the battle was always worse than the battle itself. Commander Rylan Voss stood on the bridge of the indomitable resolve, staring into the endless dark of space. In front of them, the enemy fleet hung like a wound. In reality, the Drakari Hive Armada, 40-7 warships, no negotiation signals, no surrender, protocols, no rules, just annihilation. Behind Rylan, the human fleet was small. Too small. Every tactical simulation had already confirmed the outcome. They should not have been here. They should not have been alive. And yet, they were. Enemy fleet is locking weapons, the tactical officer reported quietly. Rylan didn't move. Are they responding to surrender channels? A pause. Then no response. Sir, they're ignoring all concordance protocols. A faint tension passed through the bridge, because everyone understood what that meant. This time, there would be no ritual combat, no mercy threshold, no biological shutdown, just war. Across the enemy formation, the Drakari commander watched the human fleet with confusion. This is illogical, one of his sub-commanders hissed. They are outnumbered, outgunned. They should be signaling surrender. The commander narrowed his mandibles. They are human, he said carefully, as if testing the word. And they do not surrender. A pause. Then they will die correctly. Weapons primed. Engines flared. The galaxy held its breath. Fleet status, Rylan asked. Combat ready, came the reply. A second voice. Quieter. All crews reporting no evacuation requests. Rylan nodded slightly. Of course, no one was leaving. Because they already knew. This wasn't survival. This was time. Transmit final broadcast. Rylan ordered. A communications officer hesitated. To whom, sir? Rylan's eyes stared forward. To everyone. The channel opened. Across concordant space. Billions watched. And Rylan spoke. This is Commander Rylan Voss of the Terran fleet. A pause. Then we are outnumbered. We are outmatched. And we are still here. He exhaled slowly. If you are watching this, understand this clearly. The camera zoomed in slightly. A final, still moment. Then the line that would be remembered across the galaxy. We do not stop because we are told to stop. The enemy fired first. Space erupted into light. One human destroyer. The Ashen Dawn took a direct hit across its midsection for a moment. It should have died. Its engines failed. Hull integrity collapsed. Life support flickered. The Drakari moved on. But then, the ship fired back. Even while breaking apart. Even while burning. Even while already dead. By every known standard, it fired. An HITA Drakari cruiser exploded into silence. The bridge of the enemy fleet went still. One whispered. No one answered. The human fleet advanced not tactically, not safely, not logically. They advanced like a decision that had already been made. A second ship broke formation. The Iron Vought's captain speaking calmly overcomes. Engines failing, hull compromised. A pause, then a quiet laugh. Still functional enough. The ship accelerated directly into the enemy formation. Not firing, not retreating, just impact. The collision ripped through to Drakari vessels in a chain explosion. On the bridge of Rylan's flagship, alarms screamed. Sir, we've lost shielding. Sir, port reactors are destabilizing. So crew casualties rising. Ryland finally moved dots slowly, like someone accepting something inevitable. Then keep firing. He said no panic, no fear, just instruction. Because fear had no function here, the Drakari commander finally understood something was wrong. Why are they still advancing? He demanded. They should be collapsing. A report came in. Enemy vessels are continuing operations despite catastrophic damage. Another. They are not responding to pain thresholds. Another. They are ignoring system failure signals. The commander's claws tightened. They don't stop, he whispered. Inside the human fleet. Chaos was everywhere, but it was organized chaos. Controlled chaos. Human chaos. A damaged bridge. Sparks falling from the ceiling. A crew member holding a broken arm while still operating. Consoles. Main guns, offline. Switch to manual targeting. Reactor overheating. Good, Roland said calmly. We still have power. He looked at the tactical display. 40-7 enemy ships. Then reroute all remaining energy. 2 weapons. A pause. Then, let's end this. The final phase began. Human ships stopped trying to survive and started trying to end, one by one. They turned into weapons that refused to die quietly. The indomitable resolve charged directly into the center of the Drakari formation. Ryland's voice was steady. All hands. This is not survival. A breath. This is consequence. The ship detonated its core. A starburst of light swallowed 5 enemy vessels instantly. When the dust cleared, there was nothing left of the human fleet. No signals. No survivors. No escape pods confirmed. Just silence. The Drakari commander looked at the wreckage, then at the empty space where humanity had been. For the first time in recorded history, he felt something unfamiliar. Not victory, not relief. Fear. Because the last transmission still echoed across open channels. Ryland's final words. We don't stop. Even when we're gone. Across the galaxy, civilizations watched the aftermath in silence, and one truth settled into every mind. Humans didn't have an off switch. Not in combat, not in suffering, not in death. And that changed everything. Because now, everyone understood the real danger. Not that humans would fight, but that not pain, not destruction, not even extinction would make them stop fighting once they decided they shouldn't.